everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I want to introduce myself briefly. I'm Mariana Silva-Buck, and I am a former Vice President of Development and Education for New Hope, Inc., which is one of the largest agencies on domestic violence support and prevention in Massachusetts. But I am a Rhode Island resident, and now I am an entrepreneur, and I'm also a domestic violence survivor. And that's how I started my advocacy work and ended up working with an agency to create a bigger impact. So, one of the ways that we can see and show signs and how the domestic violence can spill into the workplace is by partners being overly obsessed with contacting the employee during work hours, whether it's their cell phone or calling the companies and say that they need to speak with them. And we're not talking about just calling once during lunchtime or in the morning hours. We talk about constantly calling or sending emails to the company, contacting their boss, and even to run rumors about their characters and try to destroy their characters within their workplace. So those are some of the most common things that we see, and also some of how to recognize some of the warning signs is some of the obvious ones that we think could be bruising, any kind of physical sign of abuse. Those are kind of the obvious ones. The other ones that are non-visible but are observational and behavioral is the behavior of the employee most likely might change. We become very good at hiding what is going on with us, but if we have a situation at home that happened that morning or the day before, you might see that we might be more withdrawn, or we might be more skittish at work. That is always like subtle signs, even when we become really good at covering up and pretending that things are not happening. Um, and one of the best ways that employers can support, that employers, unfortunately for me, did not support, and that's very common, but it's really putting into place strategies and policies within HR to help support your employees that are survivors and victims of domestic violence. So whether it would be even just saying, checking in with them, how's everything going? Is there anything going on? Would you like to talk to me about it if you're a supervisor, or would you like to talk to somebody in the office? If you have any concerns or if there's anything going on, we're here to support you. Here are the policies that we're putting that we have. I don't know what your situation might be, but in terms of, could it be even like your mental health or kind of support, you can start the conversation that way, because obviously you don't want to go and ask straight away, like, hey, are you being abused at home? How's that going for you? Would you like to talk about it? Please don't do that. Um, I'm not even sure if that is like legal, but certainly it's not ethical. But you will notice the signs and approach them just like you would approach anybody else in your life. You can certainly touch base on the mental health aspect and start a conversation from that point of view, and then see if the person really wants to discuss, or if they say yes to the help, or even just say yes to having a conversation. And it can be as simple as, can we grab lunch together during our lunch hours and maybe talk about it? Um, and of course, that also is going to vary to the degree of the relationship that that employee has within the company. But it's part of the company culture. It should be part of the company culture to create those strategies and those talking points within their HR policies. So creating a safety plan really kind of comes to the individual company. And safety plan can be anything from, we know that this is happening the moment that the employee reported or disclosed it to you, that the person is calling their cell phone a million times or is calling the company will say, once this person calls, they're no longer allowed to get through the victim, right? Or they might be allowed to call it once. After that, you say they can either not call it anymore, or you can say, well, that person is not available. So it's really, again, up to you how to create that policy. I would be more inclined to say you are no longer allowed to call here. But then understand that that becomes a snowball effect, right? You might say that you're no longer allowed to call here, the person might show up at the door. So, what kind of systems and safety systems are you going to have in place? If you is it going to be security cameras? Is it going to be the building is locked during work hours, and you have different protocols? So, really, is going to go by budget and by the culture of the company and how do you want to create those safety measures. Could be, do we have cameras, and if the person starts showing up at the workplace, if the abuser starts showing up at the workplace, can somebody in the office or security or even the colleagues, can you walk that person into their car when they're leaving work? Um, Very simple steps that really don't require even any kind of large budgeting or any difficult process within the company. Again, I think it really is really more specific to the company culture and the HR processes that the employer is going to choose to put in place. And most of the times, domestic violence does not get into the conversation of HR processes and policies. And I just want to kind of, I think the goal here is to really bring this to light to make you think about those things and how to create those policies. And hopefully, you won't have anybody in your company that needs it, but we know statistically that most likely you do have somebody there that does need, that is experiencing domestic violence at home. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to let Krista jump in here too and speak a little bit on the legal considerations and creating a safety plan. And we can kind of like bounce also back and forth on some ideas. And Krista, please, if I missed anything or if it's any information that I gave not correct, please
No, that was wonderful.
you.
Thanks, Mariana. Hi, everyone. I'm Krista Cunningham. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director at the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And yes, as Mariana, you're saying, this is really prevalent in Rhode Island. And even though this is still something we don't talk about often in our families and in our communities, we know that nearly 1 in 2 Rhode Islanders experiences domestic violence. That's the newest data we have from the CDC at some point in their lifetime, men and women. And we know from other national data sources that LGBTQ plus folks, gender non-binary folks experience DV at similar or higher rates. And so it's really alarming when we think about that. That means we all know someone who has experienced this or is going through this right now. So it's really important that we learn about the issue and we take the actions that we can as individuals and of course as workplaces. I will share my screen and jump into some of the laws that we wanted to highlight that is important for workplaces to be aware of. And what you were saying, Mariana, around the safety planning, and it really takes showing up, right? It might not take monetary resources, but it takes maybe time out of the administrative coordinator's day to screen those calls that are coming in for the victim. And it could be 50 calls throughout the day, right? If someone is harassing the victim. And so not victim blaming is still very rampant and very common, where we think of the person who's receiving those calls or those actions as the inconvenience or the person who's creating that problem, but really the abusive party is the one who is choosing that behavior and is choosing to abuse and harass. And so the person at the receiving end is not at fault and is not in control of the situation. So having that support, especially because we know financial abuse is so common, being able to support the person to retain their employment, that's part of the tactics of abuse, is trying to sabotage the person's financial well-being so that they're more isolated and more reliant on their partner. So really being able to provide that support so that they can stay employed and stay productive, which could look like walking them out to their car every evening, right? Really showing up for them in those tangible ways is really, really important. So I just wanted to add that piece before I share my slides. Let's see if I can get into slideshow mode. I know Lisa, that wasn't cooperating for you. Okay. Let's see, let me move my notes out of the way just in case I can't. How's that? Can folks see this slide? Okay, great.
Yes, great.
So we were really excited when the Healthy and Safe Families and Workplaces Act, which is a mouthful, passed the General Assembly several years ago. So it was as of 2018, July 1st, 2018, when that budget year started. Most Rhode Island employees now have the legal right to earn sick and safe leave from work. And so I can share these slides with folks. That is the link to information about the sick and safe leave policy. There's a handout, there's a one pager too that's helpful. And so, of course, paid sick leave, you can take paid time off from work for sickness and illness, but we advocated as part of this law, as part of this act passing, to also extend that protection and that support to victims and survivors of domestic violence who may need time off from work because of the impacts of domestic violence. So to attend court proceedings, meet with an attorney or an advocate, or may have medical and mental health needs related to the abuse. And that also applies if they need to take time off because a loved one is experiencing domestic violence or impacted by domestic violence. So that was really, really huge. That's a really important protection for victims that exists. And now, and just to point out, if you are a smaller organization, you're exempted from the paid time. If you have, I believe it's 17 staff or under, maybe 15 staff or under, but you still have, as a employee who's experiencing domestic violence, you still have that job protected leave. So that's an important caveat, but this was a really big win and a really important protection for victims and survivors. The other two laws in the Rhode Island general laws that I wanted to lift up was one on this. This is really great that on the state level in Rhode Island, victims of domestic abuse, as you can see that second law listed, are protected from employment discrimination. And so this prohibits an employer from refusing to hire someone because they learn they're a victim of domestic violence. They cannot let someone go or fire or terminate someone or otherwise discriminate against them because they either seek a protective order or they refuse to obtain such an order. So it's very specific because imagining that scenario where maybe the abusive partner is coming to the workplace, is harassing other employees, is creating an unsafe environment. An employer may say, we'll continue to support you. You can continue to work here, but you have to apply for a restraining order. That's the condition of your employment, for example. And so we know that survivors are the experts in their own situation. They know best what they need to stay safe. There's many reasons why they may not disclose, many barriers to leaving the relationship or seeking safety, and they really need to be in the driver's seat when they're considering what steps to take, such as seeking a protective order. And so it's really wonderful that we have that here on the books in Rhode Island, that victims of domestic abuse are protected from discrimination at work on the grounds of being a victim and seeking or not seeking a protective order. And then lastly, this victim's economic security and safety protection, that last one listed, requires that every employer in the state with 50 or more employees shall allow an employee to leave work to attend court proceedings. So similar to the first law that I discussed, which is a little more robust, again, protects that person's job when they need to step away, specifically to attend court proceedings related to the crime. So I think those are the three that are really important for employers to know about. And I'll pause there, Mariana, if you want to add anything.
Sure. And now I'll share a little bit of some of the case studies. And as Krista mentioned, we know that there are different kinds of domestic violence. It's not just physical, it's the emotional, psychological, and financial, with financial being the number one type of domestic violence that a woman or a partner will experience, but especially women. So it's extremely important that we maintain their employment, that we support them throughout. Also, one thing that is Rhode Island's working on right now is to stop abusive litigation, which what happens is the victim gets called to go to court every other month or something. Like the abuser will bring them to court for no reason, just to really try to ruin their lives and stop their lives. and with the legislation that allows them to go to court proceedings, so they have that protection there. But also at some point, from an employer perspective, yes, you need that person to still be able to do their work. So there's other ways that you can kind of maybe excuse them, like a leave of absence or something that's still guarantee that they're going to stay employed. But Rhode Island is in the works right now to stop um, the abusive litigation, and I think we have already made a lot of progress with that. That law hasn't passed yet, right, Krista? It hasn't passed yet, right? But
It did,
it's
it
pretty
did
much.
pass last year. It passed last year, but we're now trying to implement it and raise awareness of it.
Yes, so the implementation is still a little bit in the process, but know that that is there and available, and hopefully we'll start seeing implementation happening really, really soon because it's absolutely necessary. So Rhode Island has a really big step forward with protection for domestic violence victims in the workforce, which I haven't seen yet in some other states. Like I said, I mentioned I was working in Massachusetts I was a victim in Massachusetts and working in Massachusetts. Um, Abusive litigation is just something that they are trying to fight and try to put in place, and is still not there. I've been fired at least 3 times from jobs that I was starting for showing up with bruises and showing up with not being emotionally stable to functioning at my job the next day, and then that becomes too big of a distraction. So what we want to do here is to show that even though it might be a distraction, I don't think any of us can say, well, yeah, that partner harassing and showing up, and maybe slashing tires or waiting in the parking lot. It's not a distraction, or I'll just deal with it. But it's more to say this will happen, and how can we empower you? How can you think about ways to create barriers to protect not only the victim and the survivor of domestic violence, but also the entire staff within your organization, because that can spill into colleagues, right? Maybe could it be something as simple as if one of your um, practices is going to be that a colleague is going to walk that victim to their car. If that victim is a female and the partner is showing up who is a male, perhaps maybe having a male alone accompanying that person might not be great, because can create even another issue if the abusive partner decides that he's only walking her to her car because she's cheating. So could be not one person, but 2 people, 3 people. They don't leave alone. The last 4 people in the company, lights out, they walk together to the car. So those are the little nuances that you also need to consider and think about, so it doesn't end up affecting other people, and spilling that way even further. So and there's different ways, like I said, with physical abuse, when you notice signs of physical abuse, that is, as well, you cannot go to the person and ask, or at least you shouldn't ask straight away, but that is ways to say, I noticed something is going on, we have these options here, I don't know what is going on, you are not obligated to disclose, but here are some things that we have in place that I want to present to you, and those things that are available to you. If this is the case that is happening in your life, know that we are here for you. We have ways to protect you within the workplace and also to protect your colleagues. But if it's something else, here is a line that you can contact. Here's the contact person from HR. Here's your manager. Come to your manager. Again, however it is that you decide to create that company culture and put those policies in place is really to the individual companies. But if you have any other questions, just if you don't know how to do that, then look at the laws that are in place, um, get some resources. Krista and the folks at the Rhode Island Coalition for Domestic Violence, they have all the resources that you need for prevention work, for education, even to do events or speaking events in your companies to help with prevention. And prevention, one thing that people confuse with prevention is not after the fact. Prevention is before things happen, is educating. Anything after a domestic violence situation, it's no longer prevention. It is, I'm so sorry, I forgot the word now. It
Intervention.
is crisis management. Sorry, it's crisis management. So if something already happened, then it's crisis. Then it becomes probably a clinical support that might be needed versus an education support before. Um, so even getting to understand, getting to know what prevention versus crisis management is like. How can the company be prepared on the prevention side and on the crisis management side? Because when you start doing best practices after, then that's crisis prevention. And then if you do it before anybody's ever reported, then that's education prevention. And those are distinct because of the timing, but they are just equally important and can be done at any time. And I think we need to also start to have the conversation and look at domestic violence not just as a family issue or a personal issue. It is a public safety and a public health issue because the amount of budget that takes to work on prevention, but most the amount of work and money that takes to work on crisis management after the fact. From hospitalizations, how affects from kids being taken away from a domestic violence situation and going into foster care. I'm also a foster mom, so I see that every single day. And those are things that if those safeguards were in place, especially on the financial side, we probably would see even less kids in foster care. We would see less people losing their jobs and being on support from the government. We would see less people going into battered situations into hospitals. So just the financial piece, it's so important, and those components of prevention and safety is so important because the aftermath is gigantic and impacts all states of the state policy on health and on safety. So we really need to start talking about this as not as a private matter, but as a socio health and prevention and safety matter, because that's what it is. So I'll kick it off to Krista if she has anything else that she wants to add, or if I missed anything. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so glad you lifted that, Mariana, because what we're really doing um, when we're supporting survivors and responding to this issue is we are changing the culture, because that is the norm is, oh, that's a private relationship matter. So we're not going to, that's not our business, but it is our business for all the reasons that Mariana shared. And I think our workplace culture, the more we're connected, research actually shows that connected communities experience less domestic violence. And so the same holds true for workplaces. The more we're connected, creating opportunities for staff and leadership to build authentic relationships, trusted relationships, get to know each other, the more likely someone is going to feel comfortable coming forward to a trusted colleague or supervisor or HR professional and sharing what they're going through and seeking that support. And I think even donating or volunteering at your local domestic violence agency is a way to show your support for this issue and to break the stigma and break the silence around it. So I know many local workplaces will invest, their time and resources into community issues and philanthropy. And so that's a great way to make this issue visible and show that we care as an organization, because again, then someone might come forward and say, actually, I'm going through this. And if, there's several awareness months throughout the year, national awareness months, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so if you have a bulletin board, or if you do certain activities or trainings, and even if you want to focus on healthy relationships, right? You might not feel like you're an expert in speaking about domestic violence, or you might not want to focus on that piece of it, but there's ways to also focus on, okay, what do we want to build? What do we want to support to have thriving communities, and having conversations or materials around healthy relationships as well. One piece I missed was when I went over the laws was that domestic violence is not a mandatory reporting issue in Rhode Island, which means if someone does come forward and shared that they're experiencing domestic violence, you are not required by law to contact the police or reach out to a counselor or social worker, which is different because that in other states, it is a mandatory reporting issue, but not here in Rhode Island. And there's a lot of conversation in the movement and in the field about what's best practice, and there's pros and cons to both. But not being a mandatory reporting issue, again, really puts the decision-making power and autonomy on the survivor, because as Mariana, you shared, there can be consequences to us reaching out and alerting law enforcement or getting other systems involved. And then the victim has even less control over the situation than they already do. And we don't want to mirror the abusive tactics of telling the victim what they need to do or making decisions for them. We really want to empower them to do what they need to do to stay safe and to decide when they disclose, when they reach out, when they report, they get to make those decisions. So I wanted folks to know as employers and as coworkers that when you learn about a domestic violence situation, you are not legally required to report it. And I know we're coming close to time, so I'll just share that the coalition, thank you, Mariana, for sharing that we are here as a resource for training and technical assistance. We have print materials. That's a great way to just have resources visible in your workplace. And we have a training calendar as well, similar to this, where we have conversations with the community and for advocates and others about different topics. So you're welcome to look into that. I can put the link in the chat. And we have a task force of survivors who share their stories. And that's always really, really powerful because hearing directly from folks with lived experience about how this has shown up for them and is really important. And there are several members who have shared when workplaces have not supported them or when they have gone those extra steps to show up for them and what a difference that made in their journey. And so many of them say, work was such an important part of my life. I loved to work. I was proud of my job, but I lost it due to the abuser's behavior, or I wasn't permitted to work. So just hearing that from a personal story and a personal perspective of they did not choose this. This happened to them, and they're continuing to rebuild, and this continues to impact them across the years after they're even out of the relationship. Is really impactful. So if you're ever looking for a speaker or more information about the issue, or even if you want help, looking at your workplace domestic violence policy, we'd be happy to do that and work with you on those pieces. Mariana?
I also want to add, thank you, Krista. I'm also available to speak, and I would be more than happy to support the Rhode Island Coalition. So rest assured, even though I don't work with them directly, but as I mentioned, I think that's an issue that it's a community issue, it's a public and health and safety issue. I would not speak without consulting with them at any point in time. So I'll definitely be getting my resources for them as well. But I also want to add that while the employee might not choose to put a restraining order on their abuser, you as a private company, you have all the rights. If you want to put a restraining order or a no trespass order in your company for that specific person, you can absolutely do that. If you don't want to ask the person who is being who is a victim or a survivor, or if they don't want to talk about it, you can still do that, because then at that point, that's your right. It's your private company, is what you think is best if you want to do an no trespass. But it's always better to talk to the person and see how the victim and the survivor feel about it and what kind of impact that could have on them. But again, if they refuse to disclose, which is their right, if they don't want to, you can do your own measures and put that out there. No trespass order, a restraining order, that's absolutely fine. So we're going to open up for questions. If anybody have any questions, we have about 10 minutes that we can do a Q&A. And
I did
even
want to. Oops, so sorry. I did want to say thank you so much, Mariana and Krista, for coming today and for talking about this very important topic. And for the attendees, I did want to say this is going to be a series. So this is the first episode, and there'll be two more, just because we knew we wouldn't have enough time today to really dive in. So today was more surface level, and the next two episodes will be more in depth. So this is not going to be your last time hearing from Mariana and Krista. So I did want to tell you guys that.
Thank you so much, Christiana. I really appreciate you inviting me. And thank you, Krista, for the support and joining this talk with me. I greatly appreciate it.
you so much. Does anyone else have a question? Because I did have a comment to make. Nobody? Okay. So, for me, not to get, oh, sorry, Matt, because you unmuted.
Yeah.
You have something to say?
No, I was just a question of just it's very delicate situation, and from an HR perspective, just training managers to kind of how to give them a script. How do you approach it, right? So you're saying to stay more generalized, just asking how things are going. Is everything okay? Is that a more generalized and let that unfold? Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of times there's a lot of emotion and managers want to be like, look, man, that's my employee has a problem, right? And they want to, and I'm like,
Yeah,
you really got to be careful. You know what I mean? From that perspective. So is that your recommendation?
yeah,
Just stay, just more kind of how's everything going? Because they see, bruises and they see
mhm,
things and that they're hearing
exactly.
things. They hear things. Do you know what I mean? Of like, well, I heard, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm like, well, again, that's not direct, right? That's kind of secondary information. And I don't know if that's true, not true, but then you add a bruise or a mark, and then, how stories start to kind of, and then trying to help folks, don't get caught up in a story that's being told, but how do you get to where where do you get to where you can directly impact and help that employee without really offending them and saying, "Hey, where'd that bruise? How'd you get that bruise, or how did you get that mark?" You know what I mean? That's what.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'll leave it to
absolutely.
you.
I think exactly that, exactly what you said. Like you don't want to go and ask because if that is not the case, then somebody could be offended because the subject is such taboo. Which I think that the part of the policy that I would love to see every employer at some point, or even society in general, for this to not be any more taboo than you broke your arm, you have to go to the ER, or you got into an accident, you have to go and get something done. You got into an abusive situation, or you got robbed, right? Like
Mm,
nobody's gonna be like, oh my God, so and so got robbed. We're not gonna talk about it because we support the victims. We don't want the person who is a criminal to be out there and doing things. And domestic violence ends up being the same thing. We just need to start looking at it that way. But to your point, Matt, yes, like you don't want to go and ask, hey, did you got beat at home? Like what is going on? Because one, that is kind of rude, and two, somebody might not be ready to say yes to that. But I think a great opening is, as a survivor myself, the thing that I wanted the most was almost for somebody to hold my hand and say, I'm here for you. How can I support you? How can I help you? I know things might not be great. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to know before you even say yes or no. If you don't feel comfortable talking, here's what we have. I've seen this before. I just want to make sure that you know that if this is the case with you, if this is happening, here's how we can help you. And if it's not, if there's something else and you want to come and talk to us, my doors are open. Here's how we handle things in our company. Here's the policy. Here's the culture of the company, right? So then it's really gonna part from the HR and from the managers to say, I'm here to support you, whatever it is that you're going through. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen, and we have these protections in place. You're not going to lose your job. I think that's the most important thing, is to guarantee them, to assure them you're not going to lose your job, whatever is going on in your home, right? We're here to support
mhm.
you. Let us know, because you can only help people that wants to be helped also. So let us know. Come talk to me. But yeah, just don't ask them directly. Just be broad.
Okay. And would
So
you recommend the EAP at the end? Like, because the EAP, we flood our communications with the EAP to try to get rid of the stigmatism that goes along with EAPs, right? Of you're getting our information and you know who we are. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know I just know numbers. I just need utilization, right? For be able to say, yes, it's being utilized. It's a good benefit. Folks get some good stuff out of it. I don't want to know who called it or when or went to it. So would you recommend, because there is a stigmatism with EAP? I just don't know what it is. The EAP seems to. So would you recommend that at the end of that conversation, or do you think that's just, I don't know. I don't. I don't want to make someone feel even, a little bit more uncomfortable by saying, hey, we got an EAP, even though it's plastered everywhere that we have an EAP.
I was gonna jump in.
Krista, what is your
Yeah, I was gonna jump in actually and say that's a great resource, because I think no matter how many times you say I'm a trusted colleague and these are your job will be protected, and you have that relationship, so they might not want, there's so much shame and stigma that goes along with this issue. So the more you're saying contacting the EAP is confidential, continue to drive that point home. So when these issues arise, they can process with someone else who's trained in a confidential space that's not their colleague or supervisor, who they might not be ready to disclose, and just get some of that work done in that way. And then that representative can coach them into, okay, maybe at this point now you might be ready to share this at work and get some support, so I think that's a really great interim resource. But it's a great point, Matt, that folks don't necessarily want to reach out there either, but the more they know it's confidential and not, no identifying information is coming back to the employer, it's a resource that exists literally for them to assist them, as it says in the name. I think that's a really great resource to use.
Super.
I agree, because I think
appreciate it.
sometimes people might feel more comfortable reaching out to an anonymous person than to talk about it at work, because the shame is real, right? And you don't want to push them into feeling even worse. And then again, like, people want the help, but sometimes they're not ready to be helped, or they don't know how they can best be helped. So to start talking with somebody, maybe anonymously, might be a better way to even give them the courage to then come and talk to the manager after. And it's probably going to be also a recommendation from the EAP at some point to say, hey, bring this to your manager, and they might be able to coach them on how to say it in the best way possible. So it's really going to, because the EAP person is going to know them and their situation, and will be able to assist them on coaching them on how to bring that up.
Super. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me go, Tia. Thank you.
Actually, my name is Christiana, not Tia. I'm just using someone's account for work. I did want to say that for me, I did experience something like this, and thank God, I was in an organization that did handle it like really great. I had the best supervisor ever. So it basically happened on a Friday, and I was on call for the whole weekend. And that Friday, I went home and I got into a little argument with my boyfriend at the time, and he busted my lip. So I had to call my supervisor at the time, and I'm like, Harry, I'm really going through a lot at home right now. Can you just please just come get the phones? I'm not in a good headspace to be on call this weekend. Harry came. I'm sure he saw like my lip and everything. He didn't ask questions, just took the phone. Then we went back. Then Monday came around. I went to work, and I came to work early. So that day was just me and him. Because the whole weekend I was just really scared. I thought, like I lost my job and all these things. And when I came to work, he was like, Christiane, can I talk to you? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yo, I don't really like to get in your business and stuff like that. But I really care for y'all. And I just noticed that on like a Friday. And I just want you to know that, you don't deserve that. And just from him saying that, I just started like breaking down, and I just cried, and just for him just showing me empathy, it just opened up a door for me to be open with him, and like to this day, that job and that agency was one of my favorite jobs, and at that time I wasn't even getting paid a lot, but just the way, like, they really cared, but for their clients and stuff, sorry, for the employees and the clients, and just it was anybody but that, like, what they interacted with made me just always, like, made me always want to just go back there to work, and I'm even trying to get my MSW now, to be a clinician, but to help people like that, people that like went through that. So like, and if it wasn't for like a workplace like that, I would have never been like able to be open about my situation. So I did want to say that that's another way you can do it, instead of, like telling them about the EAP, even though I know like that's a trusted, like a trusted resource and stuff. Some people may feel like, damn, like, what is he trying to say about me? Or, what does he think because I'm going through this at home? But by you just showing empathy, that's always the first step. Sorry, I talked a lot. I don't know why I said all that, but I just wanted to,
You're good.
thank you.
I think at the end of the day, that's all we all want, right? As victims that survives, is to have empathy with our situation, with their situation, and understand that they are not the perpetrators of the situation whatsoever. The situation is completely out of their control, and that they want the help, and sometimes they just don't know how to ask for the help. And we also know statistically that the number one reasons for domestic violence death is when a woman or a partner is trying to leave the relationship. Those are the times where death occurs the most. Is within when the time that they are leaving is not mostly during the relationship, is when they really when they say I'm leaving, the relationship is over, and that's when they need the most protection overall. So if they're going through that, risking their lives, and they still going to lose their jobs, it can be very, very detrimental to their lives, and it's going to be detrimental to their workplace as well.
You so much, Mariana and Krista. I know it's 101 right now. And thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Stephanie, Lori, Matt, Kat, Adriana, Jackie, and hopefully you guys join us for episode 2. So keep an eye out for the flyer, okay?
Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
and also I did want to say we are hosting a like job fair in September at Rally for Recovery. So Lori, Matt, Stephanie, Jackie, if you guys want to join, please let me know. It's free. And yeah, we'll just get the process started.
Thank you.
No problem. Bye.
Thank
Thank
Thank you,
you.
you.
everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.